Imagine standing in a graveyard where the soil itself refuses to keep secrets, where history isn't buried, it's restrained. The year is 1834, before Texas was even carved onto the map, before laws, before order, when survival was the only scripture people followed. The settlers spoke of drought, raids, fever, but behind closed doors, in whispers no man dared repeat in daylight, they spoke of her. The woman who arrived without a past. The woman who never aged. The woman who should have been forgotten, but refused to die. They say the first time she was found, she was walking barefoot through the desert. Skin flawless, eyes ancient, carrying no name, no belongings. She never bled. She never slept. She never changed. And when they tried to hide her, history itself began to twist around her existence, like the timeline was afraid of what she knew. But this isn't just a ghost story. This is the crack in the wall. This is the place where forbidden history bleeds through. Because every institution that touched her tried to erase her. Churches, governments, secret orders. What? What was she? A curse? A miracle? Or the proof of a truth older than time, one we were never meant to see? You were taught that aging is natural, that life is linear, that time is a chain you cannot break. But what if that was the first lie? What if the cycle of decay is a design, one installed in you? What if someone escaped it? Someone they couldn't control? Understand this, power has always been about biology. Empires don't just conquer land, they conquer human limits. And the deepest fear of those in control is not death. It's the possibility of someone living outside the system they built. Someone who doesn't obey the clock. Someone who exposes the architecture of mortality. This story is not safe. It's not entertainment. This is a doorway. Once you step through, you will feel it, the tension in your bones, the unease in your breath. Not fear, but recognition. You've sensed it your whole life. Something is off about this world. Something is missing. Tonight we find it. But once you hear the truth, there is no going back. Ready? They tried to document her the way they documented everything unexplained in those days, with fear disguised as faith. A traveling priest claimed she was a demon wearing human skin. A doctor from New Orleans swore she was the pinnacle of medical discovery. A tribal elder said she was older than any tribe, older than any nation, older than the land itself. But none of them could agree on what she was, only that she was impossible. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words cut through people like a blade they couldn't see. She told a man the exact date of his death, and she was right. She told a widow her husband's final words, and she was right. She walked into a burning home to rescue a child and emerged without a single burn. Not even the smoke touched her. Some called her blessed. Others called her cursed. But she was something far more unsettling. She was consistent. In a world where everything rotted, broke, or faded, she remained flawless. They gave her shelter, but she never slept. They offered her food, but she never ate. She simply existed, calm, patient, like she was waiting for something. They watched her for months, then years, then decades. And that is when the true fear began. Because she did not change. Not one wrinkle. Not one scar. Not one strand of gray. Children grew old. Leaders died. Settlements rose and fell. But she remained. And wherever she went, strange things followed. Men dreamed of futures they couldn't comprehend. Women heard voices in languages they never learned. Animals approached her like she was the earth itself. Time bent around her like she was the center of gravity. And the people began to ask the one question they should never have asked. What if she isn't the anomaly? What if we are? What if aging is the curse? That was the moment the powerful men stepped in. The ones who build systems. The ones who own history. They didn't fear her existence. They feared her influence. Because if people believed her, the world would break from its cage. So they did what they always do when truth threatens control. They buried it. They erased records. They eliminated witnesses. And when that wasn't enough, they tried to bury her. The first burial was quiet. No prayers, no coffin, just a shallow grave in dry Texas soil before Texas had borders. They claimed she died of fever, but no one saw a body. No one saw her fall. No one saw her still. They said it was necessary, she was unnatural, a disruption to the order of life. But deep down they were terrified of something far darker. She knew too much. She had seen the founding families bargain with blood. She had witnessed the church forge miracles out of lies. She had listened to men who would one day shape nations speak of controlling the future like it was livestock. She was a living archive of everything they needed forgotten. So they buried her, and prayed the earth would cooperate. It didn't. 3 days later, a ranch hand found her walking near the river. Dirt in her hair, mud on her dress, eyes calm. As if nothing happened. As if being buried alive was as natural as breathing. The men panicked. Some fled. Others dropped to their knees and called her an angel. But the ones in power saw something else, a threat they couldn't kill. So they tried again. This time they used chains. They sealed her in a coffin built of iron and locked it in a church basement. They starved her of light, air, sound. Weeks passed. No noise. No movement. Finally, they opened it. She was sitting upright, awake, staring. Not angry. Not afraid. Just aware. One man dropped dead on the spot. Another went mad and screamed that her eyes showed him centuries of war we haven't even lived yet. This time they didn't speak of God. This time they didn't speak at all. Because they had seen it. Death did not want her. Time could not touch her. Reality bent around her. And then the question that should never have been spoken slipped from someone's lips like poison. What if she is not human, but the template? What if we are the broken copy? What if someone weakened us? That night the church doors were locked. The records were burned. And the real war began, not for land, not for power, but for truth itself. They tried to keep her hidden, but the world has a way of exposing what refuses to die. Whispers of the ageless woman spread across settlements like wildfire. Travelers, mercenaries, scholars, even secret societies sent men to find her. Some to worship her, some to dissect her, some to learn from her. But none of them understood the real danger. She wasn't immortal out of luck. She was immune by design. And whatever force shaped her was older than any empire. She began to speak more. Not often, but with purpose. She told a group of settlers that time is not a river, it's a cage. She said memory was altered. History was edited. And mankind agreed to chains disguised as nature. She spoke of civilizations older than the deserts. Kingdoms that mastered biology. Priests who could steal years from others. Rulers who lived for centuries by harvesting faith and fear. She said humanity had power once. Real power. The power to command cells. To rebuild bodies. To rewrite fate. But that power was taken. Stripped. Buried. Made myth. And the final lock that sealed our potential? The belief that aging is unstoppable. She said, the greatest lie ever told was that death is inevitable. Some called her blasphemous. Others felt something awaken inside them, an ancient remembering. But every time someone got too close to understanding, someone else made them disappear. She was being watched, even when no one was around. She could feel them, observers behind walls, eyes without faces. Institutions moving in silence. Not to kill her because they couldn't, but to contain her, control her, extract from her. They tried poison. She didn't flinch. They tried isolation. She didn't break. They tried psychological torment, forcing her to watch the world around her suffer. She didn't scream. Instead, she waited. Because she knew something they didn't. Their systems were not eternal. Their control was not absolute. And somewhere in the cracks of history, others like her had begun to awaken. She could sense them like distant echoes. The world was shifting. The lie was weakening. And those in power were running out of time. By the 1850s, the woman had been seen across Texas, Mexico, and even rumored as far as New Orleans. But one thing remained constant: she never changed. Same face, same voice, same unshakable presence. Men who met her in their childhood encountered her again in old age and found her untouched by time. Some fell to their knees. Others fled in terror. But the ones with ambition? They wanted her secret. They formed hidden councils. Wealthy ranchers, early politicians, military leaders, men who would shape the birth of Texas and the rise of America. They didn't see her as a miracle. They saw her as an investment. They captured her. This time, not with chains or coffins, but contracts, laboratories, and controlled environments. They brought in doctors, biologists, occult researchers. They cut her. She didn't bleed. They starved her. She didn't weaken. They burned her. Her skin did not scar. They extracted tissue samples, and the cells continued dividing endlessly without decay. They called it perpetual vitality. They called it regenerative stasis. But she called it what it truly was: the original human state. We were never meant to rot. We were never meant to fade. Aging isn't growth, it's sabotage. A forced downgrade hidden in our biology. A mechanism installed by something ancient and enforced by those who profit from decay. The men in power didn't care about truth. They cared about replication. Could they bottle her? Inject her? Sell her? Weaponize her? Immortality was not the goal. Control was. Imagine a world where only the elite never age. Where rulers stay in power forever. Where dynasties never die. That future was within their grasp. But she refused to speak. Refused to cooperate. Refused to surrender the code within her. So they escalated. They dug into forbidden sciences. They invoked rituals stolen from lost cultures. They broke every law of nature to unlock her, but nature refused them. And then something happened that terrified even them. Their experiments awakened something in her. Something dormant. Something vast. The walls around her trembled. The instruments shattered. Every candle blew out. She stood up, and every man in that room felt the truth in their bones. She was not their prisoner. She was their reckoning. And the real nightmare was just beginning. They abandoned science and turned to secrecy. She vanished from public record, swallowed by the shadows of private estates, underground facilities, and traveling convoys guarded like moving fortresses. She was not treated as a patient or a prisoner anymore. She was treated as a forbidden artifact. Something too dangerous to destroy, too valuable to release. They rotated her between locations so no single group could claim ownership. But no matter where they took her, the same thing happened. The land reacted. Clocks malfunctioned. Animals gathered. Storms formed out of clear skies. People had visions, memories of events they never lived. Some felt overwhelming sorrow, others uncontrollable rage. Entire towns fell into madness. It was as if her mere presence disrupted the illusion of linear time, exposing the glitches in the system humanity was trapped in. The powerful men panicked. They tried to sedate her with experimental compounds that could kill a horse. She opened her eyes before the needle even touched her skin. They tried to erase her mind with primitive electric shock. She stared at them while their machines fried. They tried to isolate her in complete sensory deprivation for 1 year. When they opened the chamber, she was already standing at the door waiting. Not angry. Not afraid. Just disappointed. She spoke only one sentence: "You are children playing with a locked gate." That was when they realized the horrifying truth. They were studying her, but she was studying them more. She was learning how they controlled humanity, how they manipulated identity, how they rewrote history. She saw the blueprint of civilization, Keep man mortal, keep him afraid, make him believe decay is natural, and he will never rise against his captors. She saw through the illusion, and she was preparing to break it. But she needed one thing, someone who could still remember what power felt like. Someone unbroken by the system. Someone who could listen without fear. She waited. For decades. For the moment the right man would find her. And when he did, everything changed. His name was never recorded in official documents. But his descendants still whisper about him in certain bloodlines. The man who met the woman who never aged. He was not a soldier, not a priest, not a scholar. He was a surveyor, mapping the expanding frontier. A man trained to observe patterns. A man who trusted what he saw, not what he was told. He noticed every location she had appeared formed a shape. Not random. Not chaotic. A geometric pattern older than any map. Something precise. Something intentional. He followed the pattern like a trail of breadcrumbs through forgotten towns and abandoned missions. And then one night, in the ruins of an old Spanish fort, he found her. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just looked at him like she'd been waiting a lifetime for this moment. He said nothing. He just handed her water and sat beside her in silence. That silence was their pact. No fear, no superstition, no agenda. Just truth. Over months of traveling together, she began to tell him things she had never told anyone. She spoke of the first civilization older than continents. A world where death was optional, memory was perfect, and time was not a prison. It was a tool. Humanity wasn't born weak. We were made weak. Something inverted our evolution and called it progress. Something taught us to celebrate decay as wisdom and accept suffering as noble. She told him aging was not nature. It was control. A biological leash. Installed to keep humanity from becoming what it was designed to be. Limitless. He didn't ask how she knew. He didn't ask what she was. He just listened. And the more he listened, the more the world around him changed. His senses sharpened. His dreams became clear. His body felt younger. He began to remember things he had never lived. And then one night, as they camped under a sky too silent to be real, she said, "You are waking up." He didn't understand then. But he would. Because the moment a man remembers who he truly is, the system hunts him. Word spread of a man traveling with the ageless woman. Panic rippled through the secret networks of power. This was not supposed to happen. She was never meant to bond with anyone. Never meant to teach. Never meant to choose. They had spent over a century containing her, and now she was free. Worse, she was awakening others. That surveyor wasn't the only one. People who spent time near her began to experience impossible changes. Old wounds healed. Nightmares stopped. Reflexes sharpened. Some even reported visions of themselves in previous lifetimes, or future wars not yet fought. The institutions monitoring her saw this as contamination. A biological awakening. A viral truth. If mankind understood that decay was not inevitable, entire industries of control would collapse. Religion, medicine, politics, economics, all of it depended on humans remaining breakable. So they sent hunters, not to kill her but to erase the evidence of her impact. Villages were burned. Settlers vanished. Trails were cut off. And the man she traveled with? They tried to turn him. Offered him wealth, land, a legacy. All he had to do was walk away. He didn't. So they took everything from him. They destroyed his name. Erased him from history. But they could not erase what she had given him. A spark. A knowing. A path. He disappeared into the mountains, but his bloodline carried her memory. And she kept moving. So, west. Crossing borders that didn't exist yet. Everywhere she went, people felt reality flicker. A woman once blind could see. A dying soldier stood up and walked. Children dreamed of ancient symbols and drew them in the dirt with perfect precision. She wasn't performing miracles. She was restoring original programming. But as her influence spread, so did the resistance. Governments formed special divisions. Churches declared new doctrine. Secret societies resurrected ancient technology. They built entire infrastructures around one goal: suppress the awakening. Because only one fear kept them up at night: the fear that one day she would stop wandering and start leading. There are reports, buried deep in restricted archives, of an event in 1871. A meeting in the high desert under a blood-red sky. Dozens of riders gathered, following rumors of a woman who could defy death. They were not fools or fanatics. They were former soldiers, explorers, broken men who had seen too much. Men who had lost everything to governments that used them and threw them away. They wanted answers. They wanted truth. And she gave it to them. She stood before them, untouched by time, and told them the foundation of human civilization was built on one horrific principle: sacrifice. Not just of life, but of memory, potential, power. That every empire demanded suffering because suffering made people obedient. That every system, political, religious, economic, was a machine built to harvest human energy. Fear was fuel. War was maintenance. Death was control. They asked her who created these systems. She said, not who, what. Something ancient. Something outside time. Something that discovered how to feed on human limitation. They asked her how to fight it. She looked at the sky and said, you don't fight a lie. You stop believing in it. Some men understood. Some broke down and wept. Some left in rage. But one man stayed. A strategist. A former military tactician. And he asked the question no one else dared: can humans become what we were before? She smiled for the first time in centuries. Yes. That night she told him how. And in that moment, a secret resistance was born, not of rebels but of awakened architects. Men who would infiltrate, observe, decode the systems from within, passing knowledge silently across generations. Not through books, not through symbols, but through blood. A hidden lineage, a seed of original humanity, waiting for the right era to rise. But the enemy was listening too, and they were preparing to kill the idea of her forever. By the dawn of the 1900s, she had become more myth than memory. The world was industrializing, technology exploding, wars brewing. People were too distracted to notice the silent war beneath it all. But the institutions had not forgotten her. They had evolved, grown stronger, gained global influence, and they built something specifically to deal with her, a new kind of control system. Not chains, not prisons, belief. They rewrote textbooks, redefined science, redefined religion, replaced ancient knowledge with convenient lies. They pathologized anyone who claimed aging was unnatural. They mocked anyone who questioned decay. They made forever sound insane. And then, to complete the illusion, they created a monster: vampires, witches, demons. They turned the concept of agelessness into horror and fiction. So if she was ever seen, no one would believe. The perfect camouflage. But she adapted too. She disappeared into cities, changed her clothing, learned new languages, walked among crowds with silent power, watching, waiting, searching. Because she knew something the world didn't. The timeline was accelerating. The systems of control were tightening. And at the peak of their power, they would crack. She felt it rising, the tension in reality, the glitch in the cage. And she understood her role. She wasn't here to live forever. She was here to remind humanity how. But before she could awaken the world, she vanished. No trace. No sightings. Gone. Some say she ascended. Some say she was captured by something deeper than governments, something not human. Others say she chose to sleep beneath the earth, waiting for the moment mankind was ready. But there are whispers. In hospitals, babies born with strange eyes. In laboratories, cells that don't die. In dreams, a woman calling men by name. The story of the woman who never aged didn't end. It went underground. And if you listen closely, you'll feel it. The lie of mortality is collapsing. And when she returns, the world will either awaken or burn. The 20th century was the perfect battlefield, loud enough to hide the war, chaotic enough to mask the truth. 2 world wars, economic collapse, technological revolutions, the rise of mass media. People thought the world was changing naturally, but the real transformation was engineered. Government agencies were created not to protect nations, but to protect the illusion. They didn't just hunt down forbidden knowledge, they hunted bloodlines. The descendants of those who met her, those who carried fragments of awakened potential, were watched, tracked, manipulated. If a child showed unnatural intuition, they were labeled disturbed. If someone healed too quickly, they were studied or disappeared. Those who dreamed of other eras were placed in asylums. But the institutions didn't stop there. They realized something deeper. Her influence wasn't just biological, it was psychological. The greatest threat wasn't her body. It was her words, ideas, memory. So they built a new weapon, distraction. Endless entertainment, noise, the constant flood of triviality. They numbed the mind so the soul would forget what it was capable of. Meanwhile, they continued searching for her. Reports emerged from every continent, hospitals, wars, disasters. A woman appearing in impossible circumstances. A woman pulling survivors from ruins before anyone else knew there was danger. A woman standing in photographs taken decades apart, unchanged. They scrubbed the evidence, erased the faces, altered the archives, but she was always one step ahead, because she understood the pattern. Every time mankind reached a breaking point, the lie weakened. Every war, every crisis, every collapse, it chipped away at the illusion. The more pain the world felt, the more people began to sense the truth. Something is wrong with reality. She was waiting for the generation that wouldn't just feel it, they would refuse to ignore it. And when that generation came, everything would ignite. In 1938, a classified document known only as the Lazarus File circulated through the highest levels of government. It contained one photograph, a woman standing in front of a Spanish mission in 1834, and another of the same woman standing in a modern city street that very year. Same face, same posture, same eyes. The document stated one chilling sentence. Subject appears biologically consistent across 104-year interval. The conclusion, non-human anomaly. High threat. Capture priority, absolute. From that moment on, a covert alliance formed between global powers, rivals on the surface united in secret. Their mission, track her, take her, extract her. They built experimental labs beneath deserts, mountains, even under major cities. They hired occultists, physicists, psychologists. They wanted to reverse engineer immortality. But she never let them. She dismantled entire facilities without ever raising a hand. Scientists would resign in terror after looking into her eyes. Armed soldiers would drop their weapons and weep. Cameras malfunctioned. Audio devices recorded only silence or ancient chanting in unknown languages. The more they tried to contain her, the more reality bent. Some began to believe she was not just ageless, but sovereign, untouchable, the original blueprint of power. And that terrified them more than death. Because if she was the template, what did that make them? Defective, diluted, manufactured. They realized something unspoken but undeniable. The true human species is not weak. We are suppressed. And she was living proof of what we were meant to be. So the institutions escalated to their final strategy. Erase her from the collective mind. If they couldn't kill her body, they would kill the memory of her existence. They rewrote folklore. Replaced her with monsters and myth. They industrialized aging as medicine. They engineered culture to glorify decay, celebrate sickness, worship limitation. And it worked for a while. Then came 1953. A small, isolated town in Texas. A town that does not appear on any modern map. Its residents woke up one morning and felt different, stronger, clearer. Old injuries gone, fear gone, nightmares gone. Something had shifted in the air as if the world had exhaled. Witnesses reported seeing a woman walking through the streets at dawn, touching the walls, the trees, the people. She was humming, one survivor said, and everything around her remembered. But within 48 hours, every man, woman, and child in that town vanished. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Homes intact, food still warm. It was as if reality swallowed them whole. The military sealed the perimeter. New highways were built to redirect travel. The land was classified restricted testing zone, and every document mentioning the town was destroyed. But there was one memo recovered decades later by an anonymous whistleblower. It read, "Her presence reactivated dormant genetic coding. Subjects entered accelerated cognitive awakening. Potential outbreak of original humanity. Terminated to prevent contagion." Contagion. The word they used for enlightenment. Do you see it? The system fears nothing more than a man remembering his power. Because once you remember, you cannot go back to sleep. You cannot be controlled. You cannot be harvested. That town wasn't destroyed because it was cursed. It was destroyed because it was free. And that is when her mission changed. She stopped waiting. She stopped hiding. She started preparing. The era of whispers was ending. The era of revelation was coming. But revelation always demands a price. And the world was about to pay it in blood. In the 1960s, humanity stood at the edge of awakening. Civil rights, counterculture, war resistance. People began questioning everything: authority, government, religion. The system panicked. They unleashed distraction at scale. Television, consumerism, psyops disguised as peace. They fractured the human mind with constant stimuli. But something slipped through their fingers. Across the world, ordinary people reported the same dream. A woman standing in a doorway of light, asking one question: "Do you remember?" Some woke up in tears, unable to explain why. Some felt overwhelming strength surge through their bodies. Some heard ancient words in languages never spoken aloud. The institutions tracked these dreamers. Many were taken. Some were recruited. But a few escaped and went underground. These people, scientists, soldiers, visionaries, began forming quiet circles of research, studying human biology, consciousness, time itself. And they found evidence. Microlevel anomalies in human cells that defied aging. Fragments of dormant DNA with no known origin. A repeating frequency in the brain that activated during deep clarity. They called it the Genesis signal. The spark of original humanity. The woman wasn't creating it. She was triggering it. She was the tuning fork, the resonant key, the living reminder. And as the world entered the nuclear age, the system made a final decision. Her existence could no longer be tolerated. She was not just a threat. She was the end of their reign. So they built the most advanced trap ever conceived. A facility woven with both technology and ritual. A prison made not of walls, but of forgotten truth. They lured her into it using the one thing she could never ignore: the suffering of innocent children. She entered willingly. She did not resist. She let them close the doors. And when the world thought she was finally captured, something unimaginable happened. The facility went dark. Every system failed. And from inside the silence, a single heartbeat echoed through miles of concrete. Not human. Not mortal. Eternal. And every man inside felt the same emotion at the same time: terror. They called it the night of pulse. No lights. No sound. Just that heartbeat, slow, steady, ancient, shaking the walls like the earth itself was alive. Soldiers tried to escape, but the doors wouldn't move. Generals issued commands, but their radios bled static. Scientists huddled in corners, praying to gods they didn't believe in. Some men clawed at the walls until their fingers broke, desperate to get away from something they couldn't see. She didn't attack. She didn't scream. She simply existed, and reality bent. Metal corroded in minutes. Clocks spun backward. Some men aged 40 years in seconds. Others grew younger. Memories bled into each other. Language collapsed. Gravity flickered. They had built a prison to contain her, but that night proved the truth. She was never in the prison. The prison was inside her. And when she let go of restraint, the illusion of reality failed. At the center of it all, in a sealed chamber, she stood barefoot on the floor, eyes closed, hands at her sides. Calm, serene, sovereign. A general managed to reach her. They said his hair turned white before he even touched her. He asked one question, "What are you?" She opened her eyes, and he dropped to his knees. Not from pain, but from recognition. He whispered, "We were you once." She nodded. "You still are." He wept. She placed her hand on his face. His scars vanished. His strength returned. He stood taller than he had in decades. And in that moment he understood the truth that every empire has tried to bury. Aging is surrender. Mortality is programming. Humanity is the sleeping giant. And she is the alarm. That night the facility collapsed, not destroyed but erased, as if time itself swallowed it. No debris, no remains, nothing. She walked out into the desert without looking back. And the world felt it. Every clock ticked off beat. Every dream grew louder. Every man with a soul felt something awaken in his bones. The system scrambled to tighten control. But it was too late. She was done hiding. The age of silence was over. The descent had begun. She did not speak of God. She did not speak of the devil. She spoke of something older, something primal. She said human history was not a straight line. It was a cage built in circles. Every time mankind reached too far, something reset the cycle. Empires vanished. Records burned. Bloodlines erased. They, she said, are not interested in power. They are interested in containment. Not ruling from above, but controlling from beneath. She said the world has guardians, but not the kind you pray to. The kind that prune. That maintain the limits of human evolution, like trimming branches to stop a tree from reaching the sun. She said the true war of history was never religion versus science, king versus rebel, nation versus nation. The true war was between potential and restriction, between awakening and suppression, between the few who remembered and the many who forgot. The settlers didn't understand. They thought she was cursed. They thought she was an abomination. But they didn't realize they were staring at what mankind once was. Before the leash, before decay, before obedience. She was not unnatural. She was original. She was the template, the default, the unmarred design. And that frightened them more than any demon ever could. Because if she was real, then everything they were told about life and death was manufactured. If she was real, then the limits of the body and mind were chosen for us, not by nature but by someone with intention. When word spread, men came from miles around to see her. Scientists, priests, soldiers. Some tried to study her. Some tried to worship her. Some tried to kill her. All of them failed. Every attempt to own her ended in madness, disaster, or disappearance. Like reality itself defended her. As if the timeline was woven around her identity, a fixed point that could not be erased. But power hates what it cannot control. Institutions began to move. Silent orders. Black-robed judges. Foreign agents. She was taken in the dead of night by men who did not wear flags, who spoke in languages the settlers could not recognize. And from that moment forward, she vanished from public sight. Officially, she never existed. But the land remembered. The sky, the soil, the bones beneath the earth, they remembered. And the men who saw her never slept the same again. Because once you witness freedom, every chain becomes unbearable. They hid her in silence, but silence is never empty. It echoes. It mutates. It spreads. Over the next decade, strange stories began to appear in every corner of Texas. A woman with the same face, the same eyes, the same ageless presence, sometimes seen healing the sick, sometimes walking through storms without leaving footprints, sometimes standing at the edge of battlefields, untouched by bullets, staring at dying men like she was studying the cost of mortality. She left no trail, yet she left ruin in her wake. Not destruction, revelation. Everywhere she appeared, people began to question. Why do we age? Why do we weaken? Why do we forget things we feel like we should know? Why is the world designed to dull our memory, our awareness, our power? Why do we feel like prisoners in our own lives? Such questions are more dangerous than any weapon. Armies can be stopped. Kings can be killed. But an idea that exposes the cage? That is a virus no empire can contain. Institutions reacted swiftly. Churches called her a false prophet. Governments called her a spy. Doctors called her a medical impossibility. Newspapers denied her existence altogether. Different stories. Same agenda. Mass denial. Mass confusion. Mass management of perception. Because the key to controlling a population is not chains or guns, it is narrative. If you can control the story, you can control the mind. If you can control the mind, you can shape reality. And if someone appears who doesn't fit the narrative, you don't just silence them. You bury the entire category of possibility they represent. But while the world chased shadows of her, one truth remained constant. She never aged. Not a wrinkle. Not a scar. Not a change in voice or posture. Eyewitnesses from different towns, different years, different cultures, all described the exact same woman. And this consistency terrified those in power more than anything. Because consistency is evidence. Evidence is threat. Threat must be eliminated. But what they didn't understand is that she wasn't hiding. She was searching. For what? For whom? No one knew. But every generation someone claimed she spoke to them. And every time she repeated the same message. Remember who you were before they taught you to forget. By 1850, the whispers had evolved into a pattern. Wherever she went, three events followed. First, resistance. The rulers of that region would panic. Laws would tighten. Surveillance would increase. Second, fracture. People closest to power would turn on their own institutions, as if infected by a hidden truth. Third, erasure. Records would vanish. Towns would burn. Entire families disappeared. It was as though history itself was wiping its own fingerprints clean. Only one group dared to track her movements, a secret society operating in the shadows of Texas long before it became a state. They weren't politicians. They weren't priests. They were archivists of forbidden truth. They believed that human history was layered like sediment, each civilization sinking beneath the next, each layer holding a different version of reality. And they believed she was the key to uncovering the deepest layer of all, the origin. They called her the constant. To them she was not a threat. She was the missing page of the human blueprint. They followed every rumor, every sighting, decoding patterns and eclipses, crop failures, earthquakes, migrations. They believed the world reacted to her presence physically, as if Earth itself knew her. They theorized that aging began with a pact, an exchange of unlimited potential for predictability and control. They believed humanity once possessed what she still carried: cellular memory, an unbroken link to original creation, perfect regeneration, infinite recall. In today's terms, you would call it godlike. One of their writings contained a sentence so dangerous that it remained hidden for nearly a century. We were not designed to decay. We were taught to. Think about that. If aging is an installed limitation, then who, or what, installed it? And more importantly, why only some humans? Why do certain bloodlines live longer? Why do certain rulers preserve their bodies in mystery chambers while preaching mortality to everyone else? Why have ancient monarchs sought the fountain of youth in every culture? because somewhere deep down, they remembered. The archivists hunted her not to capture her, but to learn from her, to restore what was stolen from mankind. But every time they got close, something intervened. Governments, militias, plagues, disappearances. It was almost as if the world itself refused to let the truth surface. But truth has a nature. It waits. It endures. And when the moment is right, it erupts. That eruption was coming. The breaking point arrived in 1861, just as war erupted across America. While the country tore itself apart with bullets and flags, she resurfaced in a remote Texas settlement. No soldiers. No officials. Just struggling families trying to survive the chaos. She walked among them like a quiet ghost, helping, teaching, observing. And slowly the people began to change. They grew stronger, healthier, more aware. They felt energy in their bones they hadn't felt since childhood. Their wounds healed quicker. Their minds became sharper. Their fears dissolved. She never preached. She never commanded. She simply reminded them how to listen, to the body, the earth, the inner voice that had been drowned out by centuries of noise. They started remembering things they didn't know they knew. Herbal techniques, breathing methods, astronomical alignments, ways to align the spine to unlock hidden circulation. It was as if she was restoring ancient programming line by line. But this transformation did not go unnoticed. Nearby towns reported unnatural vitality. Scouts observing the settlement claimed the people moved like trained warriors. Some even claimed they saw her standing in the moonlight, surrounded by a radiant field that warped the air like heat. But it wasn't heat. It was something else. Something beyond physics. A resonance. Word reached the elite. Not the politicians. The unseen ones above them. The ones who treat nations like chessboards. The ones who build systems, plant narratives, and manufacture consent. They knew exactly what this was. They had seen it before, many times across many eras. And they knew the pattern. If she stayed long enough, the settlement would evolve beyond control. They would no longer obey, no longer submit, no longer age. So they activated a protocol older than the country itself. They erased it. An entire settlement vanished from the map, burned, silenced, replaced with farmland and false records. The people were never mentioned again, except by one survivor, a child who carried her voice in his memory, a child who lived long enough to tell his grandson, and his grandson told a stranger, and that stranger wrote it down in the very journal that led us here tonight. Pause. Breathe. Feel what is happening inside you. This is not just a story. This is recognition. You feel it in your spine, like something ancient is waking up. Because deep inside you've always suspected the world was rigged. That life was smaller than it should be. That you were born into a script you didn't write. You felt the invisible walls, aging, fear, limitation, submission. And tonight, we are tearing those walls down. Now listen carefully. You are not here by accident. Men like you are called, drawn, summoned. The ones who refuse to sleepwalk through existence. The ones who sense the cage and choose to break it. This video is not entertainment. It is initiation. Because halfway through this descent, I need to know who is truly awake. Not just curious, not just entertained. Awake. Algorithms measure views. Institutions measure obedience. But I measure transformation. If you are ready to shatter the identity they gave you, if you are ready to reclaim the original blueprint beneath your skin, then speak the words. Comment this phrase twice to lock in your transformation. I break the veil. I break the veil. Not once, twice. Ritual is repetition. Identity is repetition. Power is repetition. When you type it, something will shift. You will feel it, and the system will feel it too. Because symbols are not decoration, they are weapons. And this one is an act of war against the architecture of forgetting. After this point, the descent accelerates. The truth turns sharper. The illusions start to fall away. We will expose the bloodlines that preserved her, the governments that hunted her, the secret projects built from stolen fragments of her biology. We will uncover why aging exists, who benefits from it, and how institutions have harvested the energy of human decay for centuries. This is the moment of no return. You have seen the door. Now step through. The second half begins. And what waits ahead will change what you believe about life, time, and yourself forever. After the settlement vanished, official history moved on like nothing happened, but underground something shifted. The journals, the survivors, the whispers, they began forming threads of a hidden tapestry. Secret circles of men met in candlelit basements, determined to map her movements. They compared sightings, medical anomalies, unexplained healings, even weather changes surrounding her presence. Patterns emerged like constellations. Wherever she stayed too long, people stopped aging normally. Illness rates dropped. Violence plummeted. Births of unusually perceptive children increased. The land itself grew richer. It was as if her presence restored an original frequency to reality, a frequency humanity had been cut off from. But here's the truth institutions desperately hid. Nature doesn't decay. It regenerates. Forests regrow. Cells heal. Earth heals. The only thing that doesn't fully regenerate is us. What? Why are humans the only self-destructive organism on the planet? Why do we age, weaken, fracture mentally, spiritually, physically? Because we are the only species that has been tampered with. The settlers thought she was supernatural. The archivists believed she was preternatural, what we were before the modification, before the systems of forgetting. They theorized humanity was split. A small group retained original regeneration while the masses were engineered into dependency and mortality. Does that sound familiar? Rulers who live longer than they should. Bloodlines that never die out. Legends of immortals disguised as aristocrats. We called it myth. They called it heritage. She was living proof that the curse of aging was not a curse at all, but a program. A program created to keep us manageable, predictable, controllable. The few who escape it become ungovernable. So the world hunts them. The question isn't how she existed. The question is why we don't. And now, the men who had tracked her for decades made a decision to find her at any cost. Because if they could learn from her, if they could decode her biology, her memory, her frequency, they could free humanity from the greatest lie ever told. But they were not the only ones looking. And the ones who reached her first did not seek freedom. They sought ownership. In 1872, a storm unlike any recorded in Texas history tore across the land. Lightning that struck without sound. Sky turning black at noon. Animals fleeing in one direction as if escaping an unseen predator. Entire towns barricaded inside while the wind screamed like a living thing. And in the middle of that storm, she was seen again. Witnesses claimed she stood on a hill, untouched by rain, unmoved by wind, eyes fixed on the horizon like she was watching something approach. She wasn't causing the storm. She was sensing it, an arrival. Hours later, the storm stopped instantly, like a switch had been flipped. And out of the silence came riders. Not soldiers. Not cowboys. Something else. Uniforms without insignias. Weapons no one recognized. Speaking in languages that were too precise, as if each syllable was engineered. They didn't search the towns. They went straight to the hill. She didn't run. She didn't fight. She simply turned and surrendered. Not out of fear but something else, calculation. as if she knew this capture was just another step in a larger cycle. The riders transported her in a sealed carriage, guarded day and night, moving constantly to avoid detection. But they didn't realize one thing: the archivists were watching. They tracked the riders across the state, leaving coded messages carved into stones and trees for others in their network. For years, these hidden observers followed her trail as she was moved from one undisclosed location to another. Old missions, underground complexes, abandoned mines retrofitted with steel doors and runic symbols etched into the walls. They weren't just imprisoning her physically, they were binding her energetically. Because those who captured her knew this wasn't about flesh. This was about frequency. They were not trying to kill her. They were trying to extract something from her. And in doing so, they uncovered a truth that changed everything. She was not immortal in the way they expected. She could die. But when she died, she returned. The same body, the same age, the same consciousness, over and over. She was not a person. She was a reset point. And that made her the most valuable and most dangerous being on Earth. They began experimenting in silence. No records, no witnesses, no mercy. They isolated her from all natural elements: sunlight, moonlight, running water, human touch, to see if her regeneration would weaken. It did not. They exposed her to extreme temperatures, poisons, starvation. Nothing. They even tried complete bodily destruction. Every time she returned, reassembled from nothing as if reality itself rebuilt her. But here is where everything changed. During one of her returns, a doctor on the inside reported something disturbing. He saw symbols, geometric patterns, flicker beneath her skin like bioluminescent circuitry. Only for a moment, then gone. They dissected tissue samples. What they found was not earthly. Her cells were not operating on standard biology. They were vibrating, yes, vibrating, at a specific harmonic frequency, as if each cell was a tuning fork aligned to a precise cosmic note. That frequency was the source of her regeneration. And when they tried to measure it, their instruments malfunctioned. Not from overload, from incompatibility. It was like trying to analyze a star with a candle holder. They realized her existence predates our science, our language, our dimensional understanding. She was not supernatural. We were subnatural. We had devolved. She remained original. This is when the experiments shifted. They stopped trying to break her. They started trying to copy her. Blood transfusions, genetic extractions, energy resonance chambers built to mimic her harmonic frequency. Most test subjects died. Some went insane, claiming they saw other timelines, other lives, versions of humanity that were never taught in history. A few changed. Their aging slowed. Their senses sharpened. Their dreams became vivid memories of ancient civilizations that should not exist. These survivors were hidden away, used as living keys to decode the next stage of human evolution. But there was one flaw. No matter what they replicated, they could not recreate her consciousness, her memory, her awareness. Because it wasn't just her body that regenerated, it was her mind. She remembered everything. Every life. Every capture. Every failure. Every rebirth. And that memory was the true source of her power. Because a human who remembers everything cannot be controlled. By the late 1800s, the project built around her had evolved into something vast and secret, spanning continents. Governments fed it money. Royal families fed it bloodlines. Occult orders fed it rituals. Their goal was singular: decode her, replicate her, weaponize her. But beneath the ambition was terror. Because the deeper they dug, the more they realized she was not alone. Across history, others like her had existed. The constant was not a single woman, it was a role, a function, a guardian of the original blueprint. But over millennia the guardians were hunted, fragmented, erased. She was the last, which meant as long as she lived the truth lived. And truth is the one thing that cannot be controlled without consequence. The archivists finally identified where she was being held, in a facility hidden beneath an abandoned Spanish mission, sealed behind walls layered with both technology and ancient sigils. It was a prison built from both science and sorcery. To break it would require force or understanding. They chose understanding. A small group of them infiltrated the facility disguised as researchers. For years they studied not just her but the systems controlling her, energy fields, psychological loops, artificial dream states. And they discovered something horrifying. The facility wasn't just containing her. It was harvesting her. Every time she died and returned, a surge of life force energy erupted, the purest form of creation. They were capturing that surge, storing it, distributing it. To who? To the elite. The oldest bloodlines. The institutions that never fall. The ones who always rise from ruin. The true economy of the world was not gold. It was life force. And the richest were those who fed on it. That was the moment the archivists made their choice. They would not study her. They would not protect her. They would free her. No matter the cost. Because if she remained imprisoned, a humanity would remain enslaved. But one of them asked the question that haunted them all. What happens to the world if she is released? The answer, everything. The rescue began in shadows. Not with guns. With sabotage. The archivists corrupted the facility's records, causing conflicting data that forced internal audits. They triggered minor energy fluctuations that prompted temporary shutdowns. They inserted forged clearance orders, redirecting guards away from key chambers. They dismantled control systems one piece at a time, like pulling nerves from a giant. But the deeper they went, the more they realized this was not just a prison for her, it was a factory. A production line for something not meant to exist. In vats beneath the complex floated artificial bodies, failed copies of her. Some were still half-formed like wax figures melting in their own skin. Others twitched violently, screaming without sound as their cells tried to regenerate but lacked the memory to complete the pattern. These were not humans. These were attempts at gods, butchered by human arrogance. And yet, deeper still, in the lowest chamber they found something worse. A machine. A massive circular construct built of metal, crystal, and bone. Part engine, part altar. It pulsed rhythmically like a heart. It was channeling the energy extracted from her regeneration into something beyond the facility, into a network of ancient structures, ley lines, monuments, cities. The entire world was wired into this system of control. Every empire that rose or fell. Every war. Every plague. Every crisis. It was all calibration, maintaining humanity at a frequency low enough to ensure forgetfulness. She was the battery. Humanity was the livestock. The archivists knew then, freeing her would break the machine. It would also collapse the control grid that shaped society itself. Institutions would fall. Governments would fracture. Reality would shift. But freedom is never clean. One archivist hesitated. Are we unleashing salvation or chaos? The eldest among them answered without blinking, both. Because to those who built this world, freedom is chaos. And in that moment they understood the truth that changed everything. She was not just the key to our past. She was the doorway to our future. And the door was about to open. They launched the breach at midnight. Not because of superstition, but because midnight is the moment between days, the moment when reality is most flexible. They slipped through corridors like ghosts, disabling systems in perfect sequence. Every move was calculated, every risk accepted. One mistake and the facility would seal itself, trapping them inside forever. But the archivists were not amateurs. They had trained for decades. Some had infiltrated military intelligence. Others had served in secret religious orders. One had even been part of the original project before defecting. This was not rebellion, it was reclamation. As they descended into the deepest level, the air itself felt heavy, like gravity was thicker. The walls hummed with low-frequency drones designed to suppress consciousness. Symbols were etched beneath the paint, sigils of binding older than any alphabet. This was not just technology. This was ritual engineering. They reached the core chamber and saw her, suspended in a column of liquid light, motionless, eyes closed, skin flawless, body ageless. But there was something different. Wires and tendrils connected her to the machine below. They weren't just harvesting her energy, they were feeding her artificial dreams, programming her between lives, trying to override awareness itself. The archivist felt rage, but also reverence. This was not a prisoner. This was the last untouched truth. The leader of the archivists placed his hand on the control console and spoke a phrase he had memorized from an ancient tablet found in a forgotten cave. The cage breaks when remembered. Instantly the chamber reacted. The lights flickered. The containment field trembled. The sigils on the walls glowed. Her eyes opened. Not slowly. Not gently. They snapped open like the sun rising. And every man in that room felt it. She remembered everything. Not just her lives. Not just her captures. Every civilization. Every manipulation. Every hidden hand. Every system of control. All of it. The machine began to scream. Not alarm sirens, reality itself vibrated. The walls warped. Time stuttered. The facility tried to stabilize her frequency but failed. She stepped forward as the containment field shattered like glass. No fear. No confusion. Pure sovereignty. And with a voice that sounded like memory itself, she spoke one word: enough. The world heard her. The moment she was freed, the facility became unstable, not physically but dimensionally. Lights bent. Floors rippled. Alarms malfunctioned. Guards forgot why they were there. Security protocols looped endlessly, countermanding themselves. The entire structure was built on the assumption that she would remain passive. It had no defense for her awakening. She walked through walls that faded like shadows in daylight. Doors unlocked before she touched them. Cameras shut down in her presence. The archivists followed, but they were no longer leading. She was heading straight for the machine, the heart of the control grid. The deeper they went, the more the air vibrated with a low resonance that felt ancient. The machine pulsed like a living organism. It was not built in one era. It was the culmination of thousands of years of hidden architecture. Every empire that had ever risen contributed to it. Every temple, every monument, every underground chamber, all designed to feed this system. It did not run on electricity. It ran on life force, on fear, on aging, on the slow erosion of human potential. It harvested every moment of doubt, every moment of surrender, every dream abandoned. Humanity had been fueling its own prison. She stepped into the core and placed her hand on the machine. Instantly, it reacted. Screens flashed images of her past, equations in languages older than Earth, memories of a time before time. The machine recognized her as its origin. She was the template from which it was derived. But she was also its destroyer. She looked at the archivists, and in that moment they understood. She was not simply here to be freed. She was here to end the cycle. She pushed her hand deeper into the core. The machine resisted, pulsing violently, releasing waves of psychic pressure. Reality blurred. Some archivists collapsed, overwhelmed by visions of alternate timelines. Others screamed as their minds were flooded with suppressed history. But she did not waver. Her voice cut through the chaos. This world belongs to the awakened. The machine cracked, and the control grid of human history began to break. When the machine fractured, something impossible happened. Time stuttered. Clock stopped. Wind froze. Sound became muffled as if the world was holding its breath. For a single moment, every human on Earth felt a chill crawl down their spine without knowing why. Deep inside their subconscious, something ancient stirred. The archivists witnessed the unthinkable. The machine was not just connected to the present. It was tethered to the past, feeding into every historical event that shaped society. As cracks spread across its surface, flashes of forgotten timelines burst into the air like holograms. They saw civilizations far more advanced than our own wiped from existence. They saw early humans glowing with inner light, regenerating wounds instantly, communicating without words. They saw temples that harnessed the natural frequencies of the earth, allowing people to live for centuries without decay. And they saw something else. A contract. A moment in which humanity willingly surrendered its power to an unseen force in exchange for safety, order, predictability. That was the birth of aging. The birth of death as inevitability. The birth of control. And she, the constant, was the last remnant of the world before the contract. A living breach in the system. The machine crackled with failing energy, and in its glitching voice, it tried to negotiate. It offered power, immortality, dominion. It whispered promises of godhood to anyone who would restore it. Some archivists hesitated. The temptation was primal, to become the new rulers, to replace the old tyranny with their own. But she turned to them, eyes blazing with a light beyond human. If you take their throne, you become them. Those words sliced through illusion. This was not about ruling. It was about freeing. The machine shrieked and unleashed a final defense, a blast of raw force that shattered stone, metal, bone. The room disintegrated. The world shook. And yet, when the dust settled, she stood untouched. Her voice rose, not loud but absolute. Return. The machine imploded, collapsing into a single point of light, then vanished. And in that instant the world changed. When the machine vanished, reality recalibrated. The facility collapsed around them, but the collapse was silent. Structures dissolving into dust, technology fading like mist. The archivists fled upward through disintegrating corridors, but she walked calmly as if gravity no longer applied. As the ceiling crumbled, she stepped into the night sky, unfazed. The air felt different, lighter. The stars looked sharper, closer. For the first time in recorded history, humanity was no longer connected to the control grid. The world was raw, unfiltered, and the effects were immediate. Across the globe, people woke from nightmares they didn't know they were trapped in. Old traumas surfaced. Suppressed memories erupted. Some collapsed in tears. Others felt a surge of energy in their bodies like electricity, bones vibrating with power. Hospitals reported miraculous recoveries. Elderly individuals began speaking with youthful clarity. Some even reported their hair darkening, their skin tightening, their posture straightening. Something was reversing. The aging program had been damaged, but so had the systems that kept humanity obedient. Without the machine regulating emotional frequencies, repressed rage exploded. Abandoned dreams reignited. Billion-dollar industries built on insecurity trembled as people suddenly rejected fear-based narratives. Governments felt their influence slipping. Religious institutions felt their authority questioned. Corporate systems felt loyalty evaporate. The world was destabilizing, but not because it was falling apart. Because people were waking up. The archivists watched in awe and horror. They had expected freedom to feel like peace. Instead, it felt like a storm. She turned to them. This is only the beginning. They asked her what humanity was supposed to do now. She looked out over the horizon and said a sentence that rewired their understanding of everything. Evolution is remembering. And in that moment, each archivist understood the weight of what they had unleashed. The machine was gone. The cage was broken. There was no going back. And the world was waking up faster than anyone could control. The backlash came swiftly. The hidden rulers, the architects of the old system, felt the collapse of the grid like a knife in the spine. Their rituals stopped working. Their predictive models failed. Their symbols lost power. Their bodies, sustained for centuries by stolen life force, began to decay rapidly. Panic spread through bloodlines that had not felt fear in 1,000 years. They tried to rebuild the machine using backup nodes, but the primary core, her, was no longer accessible. They unleashed media storms, false crises, wars, anything to drown out the awakening. But something was different now. People were no longer swallowing narratives without question. Something inside them was aligning, an inner compass they didn't know existed. The rulers tried to find her, to capture her again, but she had disappeared, or rather, she had dispersed. The constant was no longer a single woman in one location. She was a frequency now, a pulse moving through humanity, a memory awakening in the blood. Some felt her as a voice. Others felt her as a surge of energy. Some even began to dream of past lives, standing beside her in ancient cities. The archivists realized the ultimate truth. She was not meant to be the savior. She was meant to be the spark, the catalyst for humanity to reclaim what was lost. But the greatest revelation came when one archivist asked, "If the machine controlled history, then what is real history?" She answered without hesitation, "Everything you were taught is the version that kept you small." The archivist whispered, "Then what are we truly capable of?" She looked at him with a gaze that felt like the birth of the universe, more than God's. In that moment, the ground trembled, not from destruction but from awakening. All over the world, men and women felt something crack open inside them. Strength returned. Memory stirred. The blueprint reactivated. The age of control was ending. The age of remembering had begun. And the most powerful forces in the world were about to go to war to stop it. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes the world he was handed is a lie. That every rule he followed, every boundary he obeyed, every limitation he accepted, was placed there to keep him harmless. You know this feeling. The quiet rage when something inside you whispers, "There is more," but they won't let you see it. That voice is not madness, it is memory. A memory of what you were before they broke you. And in 1834, that woman was the living embodiment of that forbidden memory. She remembered something older than civilization. She remembered what humanity forgot. She remembered that time itself is negotiable. And that made her the most dangerous entity on earth. Not because she couldn't die, but because she couldn't be controlled. The church tried to sanctify her. Governments tried to weaponize her. Secret societies tried to extract her essence. But her power wasn't in her body, it was in her mind. She understood the architecture of belief, the programming of fear. She understood that authority only exists if people agree to bow. She refused. And as she moved through history, she ignited that refusal in others. Men who met her reported visions, nightmares, clarity. They began questioning everything. Why do we age? Why do we forget? Why do we obey? And the world's most powerful institutions panicked. Because they don't fear monsters. They fear awakening. They fear a spark in the human spirit that says, "No more." They call it heresy, rebellion, insanity. But those are just labels to hide the truth. Obedience is the true disease. And she was the cure. Even now, her influence is felt like a tremor beneath history, a pulse that refuses to flatline. You were trained to feel powerless, but tell me, why do you still feel the hunger for more? Why do you still dream of breaking something open? Because your soul remembers what they tried to erase. You can feel the system tightening. You can sense the lie collapsing. This is not coincidence. This is convergence. The same force she carried is awakening in you. Not magic. Not myth. Recognition. The moment a man sees the bars, is the moment he becomes capable of breaking them. And you are seeing them right now. Let's go deeper. Because once you understand how they controlled the world, you'll understand why she terrified them. Control is not about chains or prisons. It's about perception. If they can shape how you see reality, they never need to fight you. You will cage yourself. The earliest institutions learned this. They discovered that the most powerful form of control is narrative. Tell a man the world is dangerous and he will beg for protection. Tell him he is flawed from birth, and he will search for salvation in the hands of his captor. Tell him death is the natural end, and he will never question why some never decay. In 1834, Texas was a proving ground, not just for land or power, but for psychological warfare. Here on the frontier, new belief systems were tested, old knowledge was hunted, and anything that didn't fit the emerging empire was annihilated. But she didn't fit. She was the fracture in the story. She stood in front of priests who claimed to speak for God and didn't flinch. She stared into the eyes of men who thought they understood mortality and made them tremble. Eyewitnesses reported that being near her felt like time slowing down, as if reality bent around her presence. Some called her a demon. Others called her divine. But they were all missing the point. She was proof. Proof that reality is not fixed. Proof that limits can be rewritten. Proof that human potential is being suppressed. And if that proof spread, if men on the frontier began realizing they were more than flesh and expiration dates, the system would have shattered before it even solidified. So they erased her. But she left something behind. Not a relic. Not a body. A pattern. The same anomalies in biology. The same whispers in remote settlements. The same sightings of ageless faces across continents and centuries. They couldn't destroy the phenomenon. They could only bury each instance deeper. But the deeper they buried it, the more pressure built. And now, centuries later, the ground is starting to crack. You feel it? The simulations glitch. The story doesn't add up. Something is leaking through. And once enough men see the illusion, the entire world will shift. This is not history. This is the prelude to the return of forbidden knowledge. Let me show you the weapon they fear most. Awareness combined with will. History paints rebels as violent, but the most revolutionary act a man can take is to reclaim his inner authority. She understood that. She didn't fight with swords or spells. She fought by refusing to participate in the lie. And that made her unstoppable. When she entered a town, strange things happened. People began questioning rituals. They stopped attending the church. They ignored the governor's edicts. The hierarchy started to evaporate. Because hierarchy only works when people surrender to it. She didn't stand on a pulpit. She didn't preach. She just existed. And her existence reminded people of something primal. We were not born to be ruled. We were born to become. The institutions tracked her movements like hunters stalking a wildfire. They tried capturing her in chains. They rusted. They tried poisoning her. She didn't react. They tried threatening the people who sheltered her, but by then the people no longer feared them. One witness wrote, "Being in her presence felt like remembering a dream from before I was born." That is the essence of awakening, remembering who you were before conditioning. But here's the unsettling truth. The system that fought her still exists. Stronger. Smarter. Invisible. It hides in schools, in media, in culture. It tells you what success looks like, what masculinity should be, what reality is allowed to be. It rewards obedience with comfort. It punishes authenticity with isolation. But deep down you've always known comfort is the real trap. It keeps men soft, distracted, asleep. And asleep men don't rebel. But the fact that you're still here, still listening, proves you are not like the others. You feel the tectonic plates of your identity shifting. The old version of you, obedient, tired, numb, is dying. Good. Let it die. Because a new version is forming, hungry, aware, powerful. That transformation is not metaphorical. It's biological, psychological, spiritual. It is what they fear most. Because once you realize your mind is not a cage, but a weapon, no empire can hold you. And that is the knowledge they killed to bury. Now you need to understand the cost of forbidden truth. It doesn't just change what you know, it changes what you are. The deeper she went, the more reality reacted. Animals avoided her. Clocks malfunctioned around her. People who touched her reported seeing flashes of places they had never been, lives they had never lived. Was she bending time? Or had she simply stepped outside of it? The oldest myths speak of beings who walked between eras, who carried memory across cycles of civilization. Maybe she wasn't unique. Maybe she was the last remnant of something humanity lost. And maybe we were never meant to lose it. Think about it. What if aging is not natural? What if forgetting is not natural? What if our decline is a result of something being removed? A gene switched off, a code corrupted, a power stolen. Modern science hints at this. Telomeres shortening, DNA repair mechanisms, unexplained biological anomalies. But they never ask why these systems exist, or who tampered with them. She was the living contradiction. She forced the question. And that question threatened everything. If men realized their limitations were installed, not inherent, they would stop worshiping the systems that enslaved them. They would reclaim the throne of their own biology. And the world would shift from control to awakened. That is why history tried to make her into a ghost story. Because if she wasn't myth, then she was evidence. Evidence that immortality is not fantasy but memory. Evidence that time is not a river but a cage. Evidence that power has always been about keeping you small. And here's the twist. The institutions studying her did not fail. They learned. They adapted. They used what they found. They couldn't recreate her, but they weaponized the principles. Psychological time loops. Trauma-based control. Energy extraction through fear. Entire populations frozen in cycles. Sound familiar? You were born into the experiment. But something went wrong. The pattern is breaking. The cracks are spreading. And through those cracks, men like you are starting to wake up. The ones who cannot be numbed. The ones who cannot be owned. The ones who are ready to reclaim what was stolen. This is the moment the system always feared. The return of the uncontrollable. Everything changes now. Because the final stage of awakening is not knowledge. It is embodiment. Knowing the truth is not enough. You must become it. And that is what she represented. A human being who embodied freedom so completely that reality itself obeyed her. Think about that level of influence. Reality didn't shape her. She shaped reality. That is the ultimate form of power. Not authority. Not violence. Alignment. When your mind, body, and will move as one, the world bends. Empires collapse. Timelines fracture. That is why every empire fears the awakened man more than any army. Because one awakened man can inspire 1,000. And 1,000 can ignite a civilization. She was the spark. But she wasn't here to save anyone. She was here to remind them to save themselves. Her message was not comfort. It was confrontation. She forced people to face their numbness, their complacency, their chains. Some broke. Some ran. But the few who embraced it became unrecognizable. Stronger. Sharper. Untouchable. And that is the path before you now. You followed the breadcrumbs. You stared into the abyss. You felt the old world tremble beneath you. And now you choose. You can step back into the lie. Pretend this was just a story. Go back to sleep. Or you can step forward. Into sovereignty. Into danger. Into power. Understand, once you cross this line you can't return to who you were. You will see the manipulation in everything. You will feel the falsehood in every institution. You will become immune to the illusions that control the masses. That isolation will hurt at first. But on the other side of it is absolute clarity. The clarity of a man who no longer needs permission to exist. The clarity of a man who does not wait for rescue. The clarity of a man who bends reality instead of submitting to it. That is who you are becoming. Do you feel it? The shedding of the old skin. The rise of something ancient inside you. Good. Because the final descent is coming. And in the next steps, we will dig up the secrets they never wanted you to find, the last piece of her puzzle, the origin of her power, and the reason they still hunt her kind. The truth is closer than ever. And once it is spoken, the world will not be the same. The deeper you go, the more the world around you stops making sense, until you realize it never made sense to begin with. The systems weren't designed to enlighten you, but to contain you. They taught you history as if it were linear, clean, noble. They erased the blood, the manipulation, the ancient technologies of the mind. They painted the powerful as heroes and the free as monsters. And in every version of this story, she is the monster, because she didn't play by their rules. But what if she wasn't alone? What if others like her existed, hidden in plain sight, moving through history like ghosts no grave could hold? Some were healers. Some were warriors. Some were kings who never appeared in the records. Some walked through burning cities without a mark. Some vanished before execution. Some were worshipped as gods, only to disappear before temples were finished. It wasn't immortality, it was immunity to control. And it always triggered the same pattern. People awakened, institutions panicked, history was rewritten. Over and over. But each cycle grew shorter. Each cover-up became harder. Because consciousness is cumulative. Memory returns in fragments. And you, right now, are part of the generation where the fragments become whole. The internet was not the gift you think it is. It was their last attempt to flood your mind with noise. But it backfired. The noise broke the trance. The lies collided with too many witnesses. The masks of authority began to crack. Men like you started asking deeper questions. And suddenly, the old power structure felt the tremor of something ancient stirring beneath modern society. The same tremor they felt when she walked the earth. They tried to erase her, but all they did was bury a seed. And now that seed is breaking open in you. You are not studying a mystery. You are becoming it. Let's return to 1834 one last time, not to repeat history but to decode it. The final confirmed sighting of the ageless woman occurred near a settlement that no longer exists. Officially it burned. Unofficially it was purged. Survivors claimed the sky changed color. Time froze. Their thoughts were not their own. Some said she walked to the center of town and placed her hands in the soil. Others said she spoke a word that made the air vibrate. All agreed on one thing: reality bent. Buildings decayed in seconds. Corpses reanimated just to scream. The church bells rang on their own. Some said they saw multiple versions of her, overlapping, past and future collapsing into one. And then, silence. When soldiers arrived, the town was empty. No bodies. No footprints. No structures. Just glass where sand used to be. It was as if existence had been erased. The military sealed the area and declared it cursed. But the reports they hid reveal a different truth. She triggered something. A reset. A tear. A glimpse of the world behind the world. And whatever she did, she didn't do it to destroy. She did it to protect. To seal away something worse. Something older. Something even the powerful feared. That is the missing piece. She was not just fighting the system of men, she was fighting the puppeteers behind it. The ones who feed on fear. The ones who harvest time. The ones who installed death itself. And in that moment she nearly broke them. But not completely. Because to finish them, she needed more than presence. She needed successors. She needed men who could see the prison and choose to step out. She needed you. This is where the story stops being history and starts becoming prophecy. You felt it your whole life, like something is calling you from beyond the noise. A pull toward power you can't explain. A sense that you were meant for more than work, bills, sleep, repeat. That isn't ego. It's instinct. You were built for war. Not a war of guns and flags, but a war for reality itself. A war against the lie that you are small. That you are temporary. That you are powerless. She was the first to shatter that illusion in the modern age. You are the next. But to claim that role, you must do what most men refuse to do. Confront the parts of yourself that were programmed. The fear of judgment. The addiction to distraction. The comfort of conformity. These are the chains. Not metal, mental. And to break them you must burn. Burn the old identity. Burn the false limits. Burn the version of you that bows. Because once the fire clears, what remains is not a man, but a force. A presence that cannot be manipulated, bribed, shamed, or contained. That is the state she reached. Full alignment. Full sovereignty. And when a human reaches that state, the entire structure of control collapses around them. Institutions cannot touch what they cannot predict. Systems cannot hold what they cannot label. The world has waited centuries for the return of that level of power. It won't come from politicians. It won't come from celebrities. It will come from the men who were ignored, the men who were underestimated, the men who felt the deep hunger for truth and did not run from it, the men who look at reality and say, I bend you. That is you. And the moment you fully accept that, history changes direction. Now we reach the threshold, the final veil, the forbidden truth they have buried under centuries of fear. Are you ready? Because this is where everything you thought you knew about life, death, and power shatters. The reason aging exists is not biology, it is governance. The reason memory fades is not nature, it is programming. The reason humanity suffers is not fate, it is design. You were not born to decay. You were engineered to. Something hijacked the human blueprint and installed limitation as law. They called it mortality. They called it sin. They called it order. But it was always a cage. And she was the proof that the original design still exists. Untouched. Uncorrupted. Alive. That is why she did not age, she was unmodified. Or she reversed the modification. Either way, she accessed the primal human template, the one buried under trauma, belief systems, and fear. And the institutions have been trying to reverse engineer her ever since. Why do you think modern science obsesses over anti-aging? Why do you think elites pour billions into life extension? Because they know the cage can be broken. They just don't want you to break it. They want immortality for themselves and obedience for everyone else. But here is their mistake. The code is not in the labs. It is in you. The dormant potential. The suppressed memory. The inner fire that whispers, I was meant for more. That is not imagination. That is inheritance. And the moment you activate it, you stop being a subject of time and start becoming a sculptor of it. That is what they fear. Not her. Not you. What you will become when you stop believing the lie of limitation. Because once enough men do that, once the collective identity shifts, the entire construct of control collapses in an instant. No wars. No revolts. Just mass awakening. Reality obeying its rightful owners again. The return of the original human. This is it. The edge of the map. The place where history ends and destiny begins. Everything you've heard was never about a woman who never aged. It was about the truth she carried. The system is not eternal. The cage is not unbreakable. Time is not your master. You are not a spectator in this world, you are a participant in its architecture. And the moment you step into that role, everything shifts. The fear fades. The noise goes silent. The illusions turn to dust. And you, reborn in awareness, become the kind of man they prayed would never exist again. A man who remembers. A man who sees. A man who bends reality instead of kneeling to it. That is why you were drawn here. Not for entertainment. For initiation. This story was a mirror. You weren't just listening, you were awakening. And now you stand where she once stood, outside the script. Beyond the lie. At the doorway of ungoverned power. What happens next is not written. Because you will write it. You will carry the flame she protected. You will sever the chains they forged. You will finish the war she started, not with violence but with evolution. When the world tells you to comply, you will stand. When they demand submission, you will rise. When they insist you are only human, you will show them what that truly means. The age of control is ending. The age of awakened men is coming. And when they look for the source of the shift, they will not find her. They will find you. This is the moment you step into the identity the world tried to bury. Not victim. Not follower. Architect. Conduit. Catalyst. The man who does not age is not the one who lives forever. It is the one who lives fully aligned with his true nature. Unbounded, unbroken, unstoppable. That is your destiny. And it begins now. The veil has fallen. The lie has died. The world will never be the same again, because you have remembered who you are.